Brennan, and he's going to talk about the presentation plus working at the edges of the presentation API.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. You feel the energy in this room after lunch. It's awesome. My name, a little bit by way of introduction, my name is Brennan. I'm a software developer at Getty Digital. I'm going to talk about a project that we launched about 2 months ago that I thought would be relevant for this conference and for this group because it touches on a couple of different topics. One is the use of the presentation API. This is a thing that we know in IIIF. We've known from the early days of IIIF. But the way that we are using it in this project pushes on some boundaries and some edges of it that, while seen in cookbook recipes, are not often seen in practice. And so I'm going to talk about how we did that, the implications of doing that, and sustainability in ways that we might think about that moving forward. The second piece of this, which might be of interest, is that in order to make some of that happen, we at the Getty ended up building ourselves an image viewer to support some features that we just could not find supported across some of the other known image viewers in IIIF. So this is a lightning talk. I'm going to go fast. I'm going to go high level, but hopefully you will have questions. Hopefully, if anything sparks interest, we are at the Getty. The people who developed this are around. And we want to talk to you. So a little background about the project itself. This gentleman here is Hippolyte Bayard, not Bayard, Bayard. He is an early pioneer of photography, progenitor of the selfie. He loved to take pictures of himself. And he put together, along with some of his friends who were also pretty important early photography people, an album of experiments that they all took together. This album passed through many hands through the course of the 19th to 20th century. It was acquired by the Getty in the 80s, and like a lot of these things, was taken apart for conservation purposes. So every little image in this book was accessioned individually, is in the Getty's collection information architecture, considered a totally separate thing. In 2024, spring 2024, there was an exhibition to display this stuff, which due to light sensitivity reasons, can only be brought out once every few decades. So big deal. And somewhere in the depths of the Getty, somebody had the bright idea, wouldn't it be nice to look at this book the way that it was originally put together, to get the experience of flipping through it the way that the people who created it would have experienced it? We are IIIF people. We thought, sure, we can obviously do that. And then the immediate question was, how do we turn this giant pile of individual resources into something that looks a bit like that? And that is a book viewer on our collection pages, something that we're familiar with, something that we use for manuscripts. Understanding that these images were digitized over the course of several different pilot projects. There are things on the backs of these photographs that are relevant and that people want to see. And so how do we support all this? Through IIIF. Again, we're thinking there are ways to do this in the presentation API. But there's more. This is an exhibition. How do we also put together something like this? A touch kiosk, so that those who come to the Getty to see these materials can also see this thing, not just on a phone, on a big screen. And because we care about these things and we're efficient, we want to know, how do we do this from a single manifest and set of resources? Because we don't like doing things twice. Nobody does, hopefully. So there's good news in the presentation API. This on the right here, we already saw once today. I believe I saw it for the first time at IIIF at MoMA in 2014, perhaps. It's a familiar paradigm. The slightly less good news is that this is still the primary example of this that we were able to work with. We have not really seen much of this again, and there are good reasons for that, because this is difficult. So what did we have to do? We had to cook the book, and there's plenty of cookbook recipes that will help us do that. A theme I will revisit this later in this presentation in a couple minutes is that the cookbook recipes are very valuable. So looking at these cookbook recipes, how do we create a model for this book? And we came up with something like this. Every page in the book is a canvas. On each of those pages, there are any number of annotations. On each of those annotations, there is one or more images in the case of choices. We're talking about rectos and versos when we're talking about choices. And so, great, we've got a model, but there are 200 pages in this book. So how do we take our model make it into an actual manifest. And that looks like this. A giant CSV of truth, lovingly put together and tended by our collection information team. A whole bunch of Python, some of which is the IIIF Prezi library, some of which is not. And the requisite photo of JSON that you're required to put on at conferences like this. So at the end of the day, we have a manifest, and that's awesome. It represents the book. We understand it. Everyone seems to understand it. And we're not exactly there yet. Because first of all, automating the placement of annotations across 200 campuses with targets is very hard, especially when the domain knowledge of where those images should go is locked up in the mind of the curator for the most part. The second and more pressing topic is, how do we look at this thing? We've got a manifest. We have a bunch of standard viewers. We drop it into those. We don't see what we expect to see necessarily. And that's because of viewer support for these different features of the API. And so this is a little snippet here of the viewer matrix. Circled in red are sort of two of our main cookbook recipes, and you can see that support is very limited here. What are the tools at hand that we can use to make this happen? And this is where there's a bit of synergy, because there was a presentation yesterday afternoon, one this morning by Tom Crane from Digerati, that talked about these particular tools. First is the manifest editor. The manifest editor was able to provide an interface for us so that we could visually manipulate the annotations on the campuses. We devised an import, export, import, revise workflow where we could work on this, test it, work on it again, go back to the curator, ask if we had it right, import it again, and just generally have some kind of visual reference for what we were doing. There are some challenges with this. As you probably heard in the presentation yesterday afternoon, the interface is not yet totally easy for novices. I was able to work with it. Our curator, who was deep in the midst of preparing an exhibition, the learning curve was not for her. So I was the one doing this at the moment. The other problem is that this manifest, again, 200 campuses, 350 annotations, 30 choices. Working with anything that scale in the interface, no matter how good the interface is going to be a little difficult to keep track of. So we ended up breaking it into chunks and working that way. The other tool, IIIF Canvas panel. This was able to provide a foundational web component or set of web components, because this also includes things like Vault, that enabled us to build at the Getty a canvas-centric viewer that could meet the requirements. Challenges to this: building a viewer is very hard. That's why we don't have 30 of them. We are also working on uncertain areas of the presentation spec. Some of the things that we're trying to do, like choices, there are multiple solutions to. And so we're sort of figuring things out as we go. And then a lot of work happened. This is the Getty's Research Applications Development team building an image viewer. This slide is a presentation unto itself. This could be, a half-hour presentation. But at the end of this, we have something that looks like this. So we're able to page, we're able to deal with choices, we're able to do all the zooming and panning that you would expect to do in a IIIF experience. And it's also able to sit nicely within our collection pages, our existing development framework. Because what we did is we're building around Canvas panel as a web component. And so I would urge you to check this out on our collection pages. If you are going to be at the showcase on Friday at the Getty, this exhibition is still currently up. You can check out the kiosk. And finally, a few closing thoughts. This project was super boutique in nature. We're able to do this for this object in this particular instance. And if we had to do it again next week for a different object, it'd be faster, but it would still require some developer interaction. There is no automated pipeline to doing this at this moment. And so these are things that we think about, is what would something like that look like? Again, the cookbook recipes are incredibly valuable. Again, building a viewer is very challenging. And then finally, an interesting question I thought that came up when dealing with the interpretive content team is, what is this thing? Is it a representation? Is it a rendition? The reason I bring that up is because some of the images inside of it were not laid on a perfect XY axis. So the coordinates we're working with in IIIF, unless we apply rotations, which we opted not to do, does not perfectly mirror the physical object. And so how do we talk about it? How do we think about it? How does it sit within our understanding of the collection? So finally, some thanks. The rad team at the Getty, all of whom are here and the smartest, most talented people I've ever worked with. All these other teams at the Getty who helped make this happen. And finally, Stephen Fraser and Tom Print from Gujarati, who were, in the spirit of open source software, incredibly supportive, incredibly helpful in allowing us to work with the library, taking our input, and building something great. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Brennan. Make me want to go to my director and ask for money. Like this. So next we have Alía Warsco, and she's going to talk about DIY-IIIF, a sample of standalone, static, and Skunkworks implementations.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Let me see if I can make that a little. Is that okay? Cool. Thanks for coming. My name is Alía. I'm currently a dual degree graduate student at New York University studying Latin American and Caribbean studies, and at Long Island University doing library and information science. Over the spring semester, I worked as the NYU IIIF community coordinator with NYU's digital scholarship services. And I worked with Marii Nyrop, who is the senior research data engineer, and I believe a few people in the room probably know or know of, and they are standing right next to me in my mind. I wanted to thank them at the top because they really introduced me to all of this. And today I want to share with you what I've learned through the process of working with IIIF, and specifically some projects and initiatives that we've labeled standalone, static, and Skunkworks implementations of IIIF. We've approached this talk thinking about invention and innovation out of necessity, convenience, and specific application. So here we have a few contemporary folk artifacts to kind of illustrate the point. We have a DIY paint roller turned lawn seed spreader, and a older phone mount that was made out of a coin and a magnet, which I think are just cool examples of this DIY makeshift space. And where IIIF enters this conversation is when there are barriers such as a lack of financial or institutional support, smaller teams, technical requirements necessary for IIIF like servers, staffing shortages, and then just the general varied needs of researchers and groups. And the importance of these smaller, almost single-use projects, like these DIY lawn rollers, is that they inspire people to go on and serve broader needs and skunk work it in different ways for other people. So I think that there are always great use cases for smaller teams and projects to interact with IIIF resources, but I want to illustrate here that it's great for those smaller teams to make them too, but it isn't always easy with the barriers that I mentioned. So the DIY tools I'm going to share help the IIIF community in finding new and creative ways to do cool things and more contributors to the conversation. They encourage people to use IIIF viewers, think about metadata in a IIIF way, and gather community interest for tools like this that might be daunting for smaller teams and projects. So I'll begin here with these two projects. The first one here is NYU Special Collections developed No Turning Back 10 years after Occupy, after the 2011 protests in New York City. And this collection brings together materials from the Pavement Library and the Robert F. Wagner Labor Archives to examine materials created during that time. It offers 13 different themes to explore, including protest signs and printed ephemera, organizing documents, and patches. I have links to both of these projects and all of the stuff at the end, but you'll get that. Geographies of Power similarly uses resources in an examination of the potential of maps as imperial tools and also as historical sources. It focuses on how people, particularly Welsh travelers, on either side of the Atlantic crafted and contested borders on the land and water that they traversed. It uses resources from Cardiff University and additionally uses some of the presentation and annotation API for more context into maps and map making. And what's special about these is that they're mostly developed by 2-3 person teams of like a librarian and someone who like vaguely has developing experience and like can make a website. But the way that they were able to make these exhibitions possible was by using Wax. Wax is able to create a static site with a built-in OpenSeaDragon viewer with level 0 IIIF images from any image that a team wants to use. It was developed by Marii and Alex Gill, and it is based on minimal computing principles that make it customizable for different needs. It's totally self-contained, static, and portable. It has minimal maintenance and a minimal learning curve, which makes it great for connectivity with maximum reuse. It needs fewer resources and less time to build and maintain, which allows for greater customization and experimentation. So this is Bibliopolitica. It is a digital history of the Chicano Studies Library at UC Berkeley. It's a library, historical repository, and an archival exhibit that also utilizes IIIF. This is a larger project with a huge 7-person team, and then they were able to create this with Aperitif, which is a tool also developed by Marii that utilizes serverless IIIF, which we heard about yesterday. I can share a little bit about how it works and why it was developed, but it is still a work in progress at the moment. Aperitif creates batch IIIF manifests by using serverless IIIF and hosting research collections with different manifests in GitHub repos, which ultimately means a flexible experience. Once you have the IIIF manifest, you can essentially do whatever you want with it for its presentation, like different websites. Aperitif provides access to IIIF for users who want to contribute and need a lower overhead for financial costs or technical maintenance, and opens the door for collections that may not be formally acquired and stewarded by research institutions. Sorry. Personally, I went from knowing very little about IIIF in January of this year to making guides for beginners to IIIF, like newbies like me. And in using Aperitif, I was able to create a resource in about a day, and that includes scanning it, putting it into Aperitif, and creating a website as quickly as I could push it to GitHub. I work with many Quechua language materials like this. I speak Quechua, and because of the flexibility of this, I was able to put the resource in Quechua. Now I could put it into any viewer and annotate it and translate it if I wanted to. So the bring your own stuff model with the resources and tools to DIY what fits your project is not only necessary, or not only helpful, but necessary in cases like mine. So it brings control back to the work people do, whether it's a one-off comic book like this or a larger exhibition like the projects I've mentioned here. To close, part of my role as the IIIF community coordinator was finding out what people wanted most out of IIIF. And I think it's tools like this and projects like that that illustrate what researchers crave out of this kind of tool. Because when I make these guides and I talk to them, they want to use it, it's super interesting. And then they're like, how do I use it? Which is always an interesting question because there's really not one way to do it. And that can be overwhelming, but it also means that people will always figure out ways to skunk work it. I think people will continue to innovate with the tools they have to move forward, and that opens the door for more people to become involved. And I think tools and projects like this illustrate that sometimes tape, chewing gum, paint rollers, and magnets are the right solution when other options aren't available. Thank you.
You're not an Indian anymore. Okay, so next up we have Emily Lynema, and she's going to talk about handling special AV annotations, captions, subtitles, audio description, transcripts, and translations.
That's a really long title, so I won't repeat it. Can you guys hear me okay? Yep. Mic doesn't really adjust, does it? Okay, so I'm here to give a lightning talk, a report. A lightning talk is a report out from the AV Annotations Technical Specifications Group. And so I'm just going to get started. I'm Emily Lynema from Indiana University. I'm one of the co-chairs of the AV Annotations TSG, along with Nuno, I think I spelled his name wrong, Freire from Europeana, and Mark Baggett, who's been at the University of Tennessee, but I think is right now moving to Texas A&M. So the AV Annotations TSG was sponsored by the AV Community Group, formed just this year in 2024. And the question we were trying to address is whether the IIIF presentation API can identify annotations related to AV materials like captions, subtitles, transcripts that require special presentation in the viewer. Oftentimes, these special annotations are important to support accessibility. And while the IIIF presentation API does not directly address accessibility, there's a lot of agreement from AV content providers and the authors of media viewers, IIIF media viewers, that identifying these annotations so they can be leveraged properly for users is important. And then there's also some agreement that the current status of the IIIF presentation API doesn't really fully support these use cases. If you want to dig around into the current provisions in the presentation API, there is a meta recipe in the slides here that talks about transcripts and captions. So with the formulation of a new technical specification group, the first thing we have to do is to create use cases that support how or why we might want to make changes to the IIIF spec. So first use case is captions and subtitles. They're generally presented to the user through a closed caption widget in the media player. They display over top of the video, synchronized with it as the video plays. They have to be time text. They usually either VTT or SRT format. And there are guidelines for breaking the chunks of text into small enough pieces that can be displayed in a small space. For video items, captions are generally required for accessibility standards to be compliant. So the viewer has to know that an annotation that represents a caption should be rendered into the captions widget on the player. Current IIIF recipe proposes that captions are identified as annotations with a motivation of supplementing and a type of text/VTT. However, captions could also be provided as an SRT file or as a series of annotations with textual bodies. So here's the example of a subtitle widget in Europeana with the caption on the screen, and then here at another media player in RAMP in the different closed caption widget. Second use case is transcripts. Transcripts also provide a record of audio in an AV item, but they're intended to be viewed and utilized outside of the media player. They may or may not be synchronized to playback of the media item. They may or may not represent a complete record of the spoken audio. Transcripts may be provided as a text file, a doc file, a VTT file. They could be also provided as a series of annotations with textual bodies. Often, but not always, the time segments in transcripts are longer than those in a caption, since there's generally a lot more space to display text at a time. For audio-only items, transcripts are generally required for accessibility to be compliant with standards. So the viewer must know that an annotation, even if it's a VTT, is intended to be rendered to the user outside of the media player. It should be labeled as a transcript and displayed as an entity apart from other types of time text annotations that may exist. There are no recipes that currently identify how to display transcripts alongside of media playback, only for download of transcripts. But sort of if we extrapolate it out to what's happening now, we would guess they should be identified as annotations with a motivation of supplementing. But those that are provided in this manner, if they're VTT files, will look exactly like captions to the viewer, even though they might not be chunked appropriately to be displayed as a caption. And then again, transcripts also may be in other formats, such as docx. So should we guess that any supplementing annotation is a transcript? So here is a transcription in the aviary IIIF media player, an Arabic language transcription. On another example here in RAMP, you can see we have a transcript displayed in a separate tab, which is often how it's presented, as well as a caption. Translation came up. There are definitely non-AV use cases for distinguishing original language transcription and a translation of that transcription. We've definitely seen that use case here. There was a lot of interest from outside the AV community when we started talking about this. And folks who work with manuscripts definitely feel that a translation is not the same thing as a transcription. However, in the AV community, we really haven't identified a critical need to distinguish between a transcript and the original spoken language of the work and a translation of that transcript. In general practice, those are provided next to each other with a label for the language. The last use case I want to talk about is audio description. Audio description, this was a new one for many of us that we didn't know very much about. Supplements the audio and a video item with a description of important visual content to enrich the experience for blind or low vision users or people who just can't watch the media while it's playing. Although audio description can be presented in a variety of formats, including time text VTT, it currently is often offered as a separate audio track that contains description in addition to program audio. So we don't yet have real life examples of these, but here's an example in a IIIF Manifest and a IIIF player, but here's an example in a PBS video where there's an option to select an audio track. So in terms of recommendations so far, the TSG initially asked for some new motivations. Transcribing, captioning, and subtitling, and sort of initially took that to the IIIF editors. They proposed back some new either annotation motivations or potentially annotation behaviors that were less semantic in nature and more presentation. So overlay to identify annotations to display on the canvas like a caption, and side panel to identify annotations to display in an adjacent widget like a transcript. And also the idea of using the existing choice mechanism for the painting annotation to provide alternate audio tracks for audio description. So next steps, we were really hoping to have like an actual final outcome by now, but we don't yet. So we're meeting in July 2nd is the next meeting to sort of discuss the recommendation and decide whether we want to put those forward as a IIIF extension or whether we want to discuss the potential of a community specific profile or best practice that has more semantic meaning included in it. If you have feedback or if you have use cases, our next meeting is July 2nd. Everyone is welcome, and we use the AV channel in Slack.
Moving on to our next presenter, we're going to hear from Sonaj Kailas, and he's going to talk about IIIF in the Global South, reaching out to the underrepresented.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sonaj Kailas. I'm a master's student at University de France-Comté, and also currently I'm interning with the National Library of France. First of all, I'm thankful to the IIIF Annual Conference Organizing Committee for offering me a scholarship to attend this conference. This is my first time in the United States, and I'm happy to be here in Los Angeles. Everyone here is talking about advanced stuff and implementation of IIIF, most recent developments, and so on, while I'll be sharing my first experience with the IIIF. I'm trained as a librarian and graduated with a master's in library and information science 6 years ago. Since then, the buzzwords I heard in my circle was like Koha, DSpace, or Dublin Core. My first encounter with the IIIF happened when I moved into France in 2022 to pursue a specialized master's in rare book and digital humanities. As a part of our master's program, we had a class project work on Omega S-based digital library project, Bibliotheca Antica Numerica, where we just got familiar with the display of IIIF Manifests. Currently, I'm interning with the National Library of France within the Shared Heritage Project, where the digital library provides access to a vast amount of documents from a variety of domains. We have currently 7 libraries, and I particularly work on the France South Asia Shared Heritage Online Digital Library. The idea of Shared Heritage Project is to have a shared collection from both France and its partner countries. But one of the most challenges that we encounter is when trying to get images from our partner institutions. Many of our partner institutions have digitized their rare collection, but have not adopted the IIIF. For example, if you look at this example, this is from a public national institutions from India, where they have just embedded the images on their website. And I think they have just also have the option of open Flickbook and just JPG images. So if you look at the cultural institutions in India, they may not be aware of the IIIF technology, or they are maybe lack of infrastructure or lack of familiarity with this concept. This is also another example where the Francophonic Digital Library, where the National Library of France leading the network, in which they have to get resources from the partner institutions in South America and many of countries in Africa. These are the two maps I got from the top left one was from the IIIF website, and the bottom one was from the yesterday's presentation. I was wondering, I saw two dots in India, so I was wondering with Kathleen about is this project really exist? So I couldn't, yeah, I couldn't get any. In the first instance, I couldn't get any information on the Google, so I did my research, and I contacted through librarians and archivists in India. I wrote on the mailing list. Then I found, okay, really, it's two actual projects exist. Yeah. The first one is Samhita, which is it's an online relational database and digital repository for South Asian manuscripts. The main goal is to consolidate South Asian manuscripts which are dispersed all around the world. So this platform just implemented the universal viewer to showcase manifests from other libraries and archives. Their server, it's not the server which exists in India, but they're just having the universal viewer which manifests collections from other libraries outside India. And the second project is the archives at National Biological Center, National Center for Biological Sciences, a public archives for the contemporary history of science in India. They have also just implemented the simple Mirador viewer to showcase their archival collection, and there is no more much functionalities like annotation or transcription. So I was thinking about what will be the barriers from in the countries in Global South to involve in the IIIF community. There can be a lack of awareness and unawareness of the IIIF community, and maybe the perceived notion for involvement, lack of institutional support from their institutions, time constraints, and maybe some countries are in need of technological assistance, and also maybe fear of inadequate contribution. So I come up with some solutions to this problem. Some are in general, like improve IIIF reach to the areas which are underrepresented now. Identify potential IIIF related collaborations with the institutions, and also invite them to be part of the IIIF consortium. And more IIIF presence at the conference and meetings in the Global South countries, promote the adoption of IIIF across public and private organizations, and maybe IIIF ambassadors, particularly for the countries of Global South, inclusion of global outreach within the IIIF strategic framework and advocacy, and also some particular solutions. Like the Global South is a vast region, so you cannot just have a common strategy. You need to have a localized outreach efforts, capacity building workshop for the professionals, partnership with the regional organizations, funding opportunities to the researchers and also professionals, mentorship programs, and recognition and representation of the South voices from the Global South. Last month, I was reading on the news about inclusion of 3 beautiful manuscripts from India to the UNESCO World Memory of the World Register. I hope someday I could see them on a IIIF platform with all functionalities. My presentation is there on the folder. You can see all these websites. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, we have one more presentation and then we'll go on to Q&A. So next, we're going to hear from Wai-Yin Kwan, and she's going to talk about integrating Clover IIIF viewer into collections management software, CollectiveAccess.
Okay, I'm Wai-Yin Kwan, a software developer at Arling, and I'm going to talk about integrating Clover IIIF viewer into our CollectiveAccess. So about CollectiveAccess, we're an open source software for cataloging and publishing collections, and it's maintained by the company Arling, and we support various media types, including images, video, audio, 3D, and PDFs. And for our zoomable images, we use OpenSea Dragon plus a custom IIIF image server. And in 2003, we had 2 projects that involved us needing to update CollectiveAccess. One is we wanted to redo our front-end application. And number 2, the Grand Rapids Public Library wanted us to build a newspaper viewer, open source newspaper viewer into CollectiveAccess. So we looked at various options. We could either upgrade our existing media players or build our own custom viewers, or et cetera, et cetera. But then after looking at Clover IIIF viewer and looking at the IIIF the cookbook recipes, we decided to add Clover into CollectiveAccess and add support for more of the IIIF specs. So when we were playing with Clover, we realized that it was missing some key functionalities that we needed. So we contacted the Clover developers at Adam and Matt to see how we could collaborate. Never talked to them before this. And so communicated via Slack, Zoom meetings, and pull requests. And then a little bit about Grand Rapids Public Library. They're the public library system for the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they have a collection of photographs, archival material, and newspapers dating back to the 19th century. So let me demo what we did. So this is the home page. Let's do a search for mayor. And they return the results. And one of the results is a newspaper. And when you click on it, it shows a newspaper viewer with the search results on the side. When you click on any of those search results, it zooms in onto the page. And another feature we needed was to let users create clippings where they can select an area on the page, add whatever notes they want, and it saves it to the database. And then what they can do is then download these saved images as a PDF for their research. And this annotation viewer is built using annotations. So that simple little demo took a lot of work. So we had to make multiple changes in both CollectiveAccess and Clover. So for Clover, we had to add support for many different types of annotation using the IIIF codebook. And for CollectiveAccess, we had to update our server to create more of these manifests. We had to add content search support to both software packages. And for the clipping editors, we realized something like that so specific, it doesn't belong into the Clover code base, that it's better as a separate plugin. So we had to add plugin support into Clover. And as CollectiveAccess, we had to build the plugin. And what some other stuff that wasn't shown in the demo was that we have a lot of clients with PDFs. And when we talked to the Clover developers, they didn't want to add a PDF viewer into Clover because it's not covered by the IIIF spec. So the compromise we came up with is they added support for this thing called custom display, where any third-party person who needed to support a media type that's not covered by Clover, they can build their own component, and so that Clover can and then it will be used by Clover. And a lot of our clients, they are very picky about what the site looks like. So we asked the Clover devs, can you just add more CSS classes to your components so that external users can style the site to whatever they want to look like. So all these updates are available in Clover right now, so you can do npm install and get all this neat stuff. And for us, for the Grand Rapids site, we're still working on it. By the finished site will be launched in September 2020, in September of this year. And there was a lot of collaboration between our two teams, and both of our teams are small development teams with a modest budget, and working together allowed us to do more than what each team could have done by themselves. Basically, we had 2 developers on our team, 2 developers on the Clover team. So we basically kind of doubled our development team without costing each project any extra money, which is kind of cool. And it also allowed us to focus on our strength. The Clover team was much better at IIIF than we were. So we can rely, like when I do my pull request, they go, hey, can you make your thing look more like IIIF? It's like, okay, I can do that. And for CollectiveAccess, we have a lot of different variety of projects. So we would bring up use cases that the Clover team didn't think about, but we're like, yeah, this is actually important if you want your viewer to be adopted by more projects. You kind of need to add some stuff. And we did. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. So if all the speakers wanna join us here, and we'll go on to Q&A.
We'll talk about Contentdm and updating support of Sugar. It's yours.
Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Shane Huddleston. I am with OCLC. OCLC. Is it not? Oh, is it on?
Yeah.
Testing. Okay. Just a little bit there. I'm Shane Huddleston with OCLC. For those who aren't familiar with OCLC, we're a nonprofit organization that provides shared technology services. We do original research, we do community programs for libraries, museums, and archives worldwide. Today, I'm going to talk about how we are using IIIF in conjunction with our descriptive metadata services in our ContentDM service. So a little bit about ContentDM. What is it? It is OCLC's digital collection management system. It's where you can create and showcase your digital materials. Across all Contentdm sites today, there is at least 100 million digital assets spread across all of those organizations globally. And we are in the midst of a major overhaul, a rethink, a reimagining of Contentdm. And so that is the time to really think about how to build things. And that's the data model and the technology stack and the use cases and the user experience and everything. And so IIIF is a key part of that process. So we've, OCLC is a supporter of IIIF. We've supported IIIF in our software for many years. Today, that level of support is decent, but could be better. And so as we're redesigning the system, we are even more deeply embracing IIIF APIs across the board. What that ultimately amounts to is more format support. So this new system will support images, of course, audio and video. We support PDFs, and what I mean by that is dynamically converting PDFs to images so that you can render your PDFs in the IIIF stack. And also some support for supplemental information like transcripts and OCR text and annotations. So IIIF, we sort of build the system up with the IIIF model. It's kind of inherent to the way we are defining the structural side of digital objects. But of course, we care a lot at OCLC about descriptive metadata. It's kind of a core thing that we do. And we are engaged in core infrastructure for linked data descriptive services. Some of you may have heard of the WorldCat entity system. And so with this project, we have been able to kind of fuse the two together. So IIIF is handling the structural side, digital object access, the persistence, endpoints, identifiers for every digital asset and the relationship between digital assets. And on the descriptive side, we are now able to embrace WorldCat entities, descriptive headings, and to connect those directly. So once you bring those two together, that ultimately leads to a better search experience. It enhances discovery because you are using reliable headings that are repeated, shared across institutions. And then you can leverage all of the amazing benefits on the discovery side, the end user experience side that we've been seeing the last 2 days. Another aspect of this, which WorldCat entities is designed to support, is allowing libraries and archives to define just the right level of detail for their unique materials. So there are advantages to linked data, sort of technical advantages to linked data that you would get from a traditional authority or a traditional identifier service. But with WorldCat entities, you can create entities. You can define your entity to fit your materials. And maybe you're the only user of those, or maybe there's a couple institutions who might ever actually use those identifiers, but they're in a shared environment that you can leverage across the board. That also opens up kind of a deeper level of engagement with communities in terms of larger communities in terms of descriptive practice. So you can be more flexible in terms of which terminology you choose to assign to your digital content. So I just want to show an example of this today and how this will improve in the future. So what we see here is a screen cap of a photograph from the 1950s of a library in Columbus, Ohio, in the Columbus Metropolitan Library's digital repository. So if we zoom in on one facet of the metadata here, what Columbus Metro has done is to find a neighborhood field, a metadata property, and they have curated on their own a list of the neighborhoods of Columbus. So in this case, this building is an Italian village, and Italian village is kind of a section of the short north in the city of Columbus. So the way this is modeled right now, it's just text. If an end user, if a human clicks on that link there, they'll run a search and they'll see related materials because it's running a search for other things that have the phrase Italian village. That works well. It works well enough to find related materials, and especially when the librarian or archivist or cataloger has curated the metadata precisely, it works extremely well. But it's also limited in the sense that you have to run the search in the right way. If you just search for Italian village as two separate words, you're going to find less relevant materials. Another aspect of this is that Italian village is a term that one institution is maintaining on their own. It's not, this is a screenshot from LC. It's not an authoritative heading. It's not found in a system like that, and it really shouldn't be. I don't think anyone wants to model every neighborhood in every metropolitan area in a resource like LC. That would be too noisy. But for their purposes, they need it. They are going to use this Italian village heading over and over again. Other institutions in the Columbus area will do the same thing. So that's where WorldCat entities comes in. So this is a screenshot of the current in production today WorldCat entities system. There is an entity for Italian village. There is a persistent identifier. There's a URI right there that will exist forever. And you get some kind of structural and contextual information about what this thing is. It's an administrative area in our data model. There's some human-friendly stuff here. It's a neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. So anyone looking at this can figure out what it is. And then there's some more structural, more well-structured contextual information as well. So it is a part of the city of Columbus. If you were to drill into the Columbus entity, that's a part of the state of Ohio, part of the country of the United States of America. So you have like a full stack of geographic semantic information available to you just by knowing the identifier for Italian village. There's a date associated with it. It was officially incorporated into the city of Columbus in 1862. So that's sort of the founding date of Italian village. There's geographic information. So there's lat long coordinates in there. You can dereference those, look them up, and use them in a map UI. And then there are other sources, maybe not an authoritative source like LC, but Wikidata has an entry for Italian village. There's a Wikipedia page for Italian village. So you can get additional information if you chase down the same as and look up what is available in Wikidata. So all of this comes together and gives you quite a bit more context. So the cataloger only has to find the Italian village entity, select it, share it with other institutions potentially, keep it to themselves. You know, could go either way. They could curate a list of neighborhoods of Columbus. They could just basically define a vocabulary that is all of the identifiers, all of the entity identifiers for all of the neighborhoods of Columbus. That vocabulary could be shared. So this all adds up to a system, a platform that sort of supports localized knowledge, localized terminology for descriptive practice. I was also struck by, there was the presentation yesterday from Sarah and Bennett from the page where you were talking about the sort of one of the AI impacts on archives and entity matching. So this is a case where you can do matching just based on the term Italian village, but with the entity, the full graph of the relationship of Italian village to all of these other parts and pieces, you have a lot more to go on if you're doing a language model matching framework. So if you want to know more about ContentDM, you can talk to me. There's a webpage to kind of keep abreast of what's going on with ContentDM. There's also some links here for WorldCat entities. As I mentioned, WorldCat entities is live right now. You can go to that URL and search. There's a search page there. You can sort of interact with it as a human and see what is available there. If you have more deeper questions about WorldCat entities, I would encourage you to find Jeff Mixter, who's somewhere, he's up there. He knows a lot about that. You can also ask me. And I also have some other colleagues here, Missy Tubbs and Eric Meyer. So if you have any questions for any of us, please chase us down. Happy to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. And we're going now to the second presentation, down to Clinical Trinity College, Cambridge, tutorial for managers.
Right. Lovely to see you all again. Probably take this. I tend to walk around a little bit. All right. So the IIIF community is replete with guides. Guides for selling IIIF to your CIO, to your engineers, to your curators, your archivists, your deans, your other managers, your researchers. But what seems to be missing is a guide for managers, people who have IIIF resources already in their institutions. Guides for both managing those resources, as well as managing the people who are responsible for maintaining and updating and really kind of keeping abreast of what we ought to be doing. Unfortunately, I do have to start this paper with a couple of caveats. If you looked in your program at the abstract for this paper, it'll want to say that we're presenting a framework for managers. We are not, no. Instead, this paper is based upon the experience of myself and also my manager, Steven Archer at Trinity College, who's quite disappointed that he can't be here today, which is the second caveat. Unfortunately, you just have me. However, Stephen was quite disappointed that he couldn't make it here, so he grabbed his iPhone and decided to address you himself. How do we make this louder? I can hear him, but I don't think anybody else can. Yep. That is by far the most awkward 3 minutes I've ever spent. Never did I think I'd be holding up a mic to an owl, and just you wait, I get to do it again. Lucky me.
Did you summarize that at all? I think most of us spent really clear. Was there anything?
Ah, all right. Well, mostly Stephen was just introducing himself. The long and short of it is he's worked at several different institutions, all of which have IIIF instances, at Corpus Christi, Cambridge, as well as at Christchurch and Oxford. But in those roles, he was adjacent to the IIIF. He maybe corrected some metadata, but never in the code. It was something that was managed for him by either the Bodleian or by Stanford. So when it comes to sort of managing people, he never really had to. Well, not digital people anyways. And so when he came to Trinity and found that actually all of our IIIF is hosted by us, there is no one else. And indeed, I am the sole person who manages digital output in any one of the 31 constituent colleges of the University of Cambridge, which makes it a bit lonely at times. However, my predecessor was in post for 14 years. He built the library from scratch, but he decided to leave to follow his wife to Switzerland. I'm told it's lovely there. However, that meant that I was coming in. Now, I was told when I got the job that there was going to be someone in IT who had helped him build that digital library. Turns out that guy left. I don't head to Switzerland, but who knows? So instead, I came into a role basically blind, with 5 sides of A4 to sort of guide me on my way, which Stephen is finding, well, a new challenge. The previous person who'd been there, he inherited someone who already had the expertise, where I'm coming in without knowledge of these systems. Which is the first point there. How do I make myself accountable, and how does Stephen understand what I'm doing every day? So the first part is I break my work down into projects. Projects which I have documentation for, because writing documentation for yourself is probably about the dullest thing you could possibly do. However, I didn't get any documentation from my predecessor. And if I get hit by a bus, which I think should be our overriding process, if one is hit by a bus, there ought to be something in place that then can be used or picked up. For the second one, if I'm explaining what I'm doing to Stephen, there cannot be JSON involved. So Dan, I'm very sorry. This is the one presentation where there will not be a slide of JSON. We're going a little off piece here. I need to tell him why I'm doing it and what I'm doing, but critically not how, because that's where the disconnect things come in. Also, I need to give myself some timelines, otherwise nothing will ever get done. But I also need to be realistic about my own skills and the fact that sometimes things go wrong and I do not know how to fix them. Which is the final part, is he needs to be all right with me asking for help. Help from our IT department, help from many of you in this room, help from just about anybody I can find at times. All right, he's going to try to address you again. I'm not sure where the sound is coming out of this owl. I get to stand here again with this microphone. Ah.
Everyone cross your fingers.
I knew this with a video was going to be challenging today, but
About a year ago, manager and predecessor announced that he was going to leave for a new role overseas. When posting colleges vacated, as did the department, were asked to look at the roles, see whether the jobs had changed, whether we still need it, and questions were being asked of me as to whether, did you need this role any longer? These sorts of questions of people saying, well, isn't everything digitized? Shouldn't we be doing it for years? Why isn't it all done? And why do we need to manage it? It's just a load of photographs. My role here really is to advocate for the support we need to run the digital collections and to make the point that the digital library really needs just as much support and as much management as a physical collection does. Sure, there are some shared skills that we might have between us, between a technical role like this and a more traditional library role. But it has to be recognised that it is a much more technical role and requires specialist skills, specialist knowledge to be able to do it successfully.
Fully.
And convinced the college that we needed to replace positions like for like, a real concern that we had was around the recruitment process, because we had a great level of uncertainty about questions that we could actually ask in the process that would demonstrate the candidate's competency, but that weren't so technical that we simply wouldn't understand the answers that people were giving to us. With a limited pool of people that came doing this kind of work, and so we weren't able to bring in an external member to the panel. So we had to come up with topics for discussion that we felt that we could at least follow, and to get a sense of how they were approaching things.
So this slide comes from Stephen. What he needed to think about when hiring me. And as a disclaimer, I don't remember what they asked me in the interview, so really we're flying into this blind. But he needed to set questions in a way that he could understand the responses. He told you that himself. But what they were also looking for was someone who could communicate about technical ideas, technical problems, and technical frameworks without using technical language. Because at the end of the day, he is going to need to work with, well, me, or whoever they would have hired in my place. If I can't explain what I need to do or why I need to do it, we're just going to be talking at cross paths, really, rather than forging a hopefully good working relationship. So I'll see when I get back to Cambridge.
In person, Posters gave us a chance to really look at what we were doing. Although Anne and I had never worked directly together before this, the fact that we had had a shared experience of both having managed Parker on the web and the Google Company when I left Corpus, it meant that we'd be able to build on this kind of shared understanding and shared experience and work productively together since. Key to this really has been Anne's perceptiveness about what I was able to understand about what she was doing, and when it was clear that she'd lost me entirely. For context, my role here as a librarian and as head of the department is to oversee the library as a whole, managing the day-to-day operation of our college library where students are working day in, day out, overseeing special collections here in the REN, looking at the medieval manuscripts and the 1100 books you see behind me here, but also the college archive and our model manuscripts holding, alongside them supervising Anne's work as well. I'm managing a team of 26 full and part-time staff, and my remit therefore is really broad. I'm a professionally qualified librarian by trade, but manage a team consisting of other qualified librarians, 3 professional archivists, and then those with technical and specialist skills like Anne and our photographer. My knowledge of all areas of what everyone here in the library is doing can be kind of surface level for the most part, and this can be a challenge when decisions need to be made about more technical elements, particularly if this results in needing input from other departments within the institution. So if we need IT support, or if we need our colleagues in the what we call the development office, if we do fundraising here, if we need more money to help continue projects, I need to have a really clear understanding.
So how do he and how do I advocate for the support for IIIF and digital infrastructure that we need? After all, he's my lead. He is the one who needs to go address the board, address the committees, address the funding bodies. But I need to give him the information that he needs in order to basically have that conversation. So we keep to big questions, mainly about costs. How much is it going to cost? Because like any institution, that is a fundamental question, especially when you're talking about digital infrastructure. We go for some metaphors. Our images live in a lake. Servers are boats on that lake. They can be boats that are physically on the lake, or they can be boats in the clouds. Find a metaphor that works and stick with it. because at least that way you're following through. Now, he says that he's a qualified librarian, and he is, and he has interacted with GLAM before. But I think that he also sort of sells himself short here, because our concerns about our digital resources are not that different than our physical resources. They need to be kept safe and secure. The way we do that is different, but the concern is the same. Similarly, they need to be evaluated for repair or upgrade. We do this with conservators currently. We do it with our IT staff for our digital resources. And finally, we need to be taking advantage of changes in the field. Previously, when books were repaired with Scotch tape and a bit of hope, that was not great. But now we have other ways of repairing them. Similarly, things and technical infrastructure and plugins for Mirador and the fact that it's upgraded to React 18 is also great. And that will help us move into the future. So he's going to wrap up for me here with really a plea and also a note on community.
I need to be able to fully understand, so a small plea just to try to keep as much jargon out of those conversations as possible, because I need to be able to stand up to questioning and ask about something, so it's no good me being able to just talk about an API and then not being able to fully explain what that does. I don't consider myself to be particularly technically minded, and I don't think my position here in that sense is unique by any means, because I find myself managing high-performing teams doing technical and complex work. In the case of the library's digital collections, I'm aware that there's this whole network of IIIF-related work going on outside of the library, and I really rely on Anne as a kind of conduit to that world, and for her to be able to be there with you today, to be learning from you, is such a great thing for us, because it allows those ideas then to flow back into our practices here. And
I agree. The community here is fundamental, and I also quite like LA. However, it's really the ability to take things back, to make our own practice better, that is so valuable about these meetings. So I hope that this was, well, interesting for at least some of you in the room, those of us who are librarians or archivists or responsible for managing some teams. I'm extremely grateful to Lynn for not making me hold that microphone up to the owl for any longer than I had to, and we welcome your questions. I will be around, clearly, and Stephen asked that I pass along his email as well, should you have questions for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and you always welcome to from Switzerland. So next presentation before the Q&A, Brittny and Lapierre from the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, who is going to talk about not sharing, inclusive access to GLAM collection.
Okay, can you guys hear me if I stay here? Yeah, okay. So my name's Brittny. I'm the senior UX developer at the Canadian Research Knowledge Network. CRKN members include 85 institutions across Canada, spanning world-class academic, public, and national libraries, as well as research institutions. Our members support open access of our Canadian heritage through our Contentdm access platform. We're partway through our access platform modernization journey. Switching to IIIF as our data model is central to our plan of simplifying our infrastructure, leading to features for better supporting alternative access methods through advanced open source tooling. CRKN's digitization workflow starts with the selection of materials with our Contentdm content subcommittee members. We focus on current research needs, addressing gaps resulting from historical biases in the Contentdm collection, and making valuable historical material at CRKN member institutions accessible to the world. Once items are selected to be added to Contentdm, materials are scanned and images are processed to ensure good readability. Catalogers will use the Digerati manifest editor to view the manifest for cataloging purposes and may add values to any fields necessary in the manifest.
Then importantly, OCR is run on the images using transcripts and Abby where possible to provide PDF versions of our items. As well, the OCR metadata will be added to our IIIF presentation manifests to the See Also field. This will allow us to easily adopt Gujarati's Maddox software for OCR correction in the future. Using Maddox will enhance the accuracy of our OCR data, which is crucial for our users who rely on screen reader software. It could also help us with crowdsourcing to increase the number of accessible handwritten items in our collection. Final checks before publishing will be done in the manifest editor, ensuring the content is ready for accessing by patrons. The manifest editor will allow us to preview our manifests in multiple viewers to check how the fields will be displayed to our users. We can even configure it to open in our instance of Mirador that I'm going to be diving deeper into later in this presentation. Then patrons will use Mirador, the Mirador viewer on our Blacklight Access website to view our materials. At this stage, we also aid our patrons in accessing of the materials through offering user support. All right. People with disabilities should have the ability to live a full, independent life at home and work within an inclusive community. Through integration and full participation, persons with disabilities can participate in all aspects of community life, economic, social, and cultural. A critical component of CRCan's adoption of Mirador is ensuring a good user experience for individuals with disabilities. If we don't focus on this, it will lead to unequal access to our content. Adhering to universal design principles. Sorry, everybody, I need to read. Adhering to universal design principles is helping us make our content accessible, usable, and inclusive for every visitor. In universal design, you create a single solution to accommodate a wide range of users. To reach that goal, you need to collect real user input and involve diverse participants in UX testing. This will provide a holistic understanding of how various accessibility needs can be incorporated in your design. Despite its importance, recruiting specialized user groups for user testing can be challenging. To address these challenges, we collaborate with Access Changes Everything Inc., or ACE, for accessibility testing, benefiting from their established pool of users with diverse accessibility needs. ACE runs accessibility user testing with a panel of users with diverse disabilities, including cognitive, developmental, and physical disabilities, to use and provide feedback on software. And I have a short video, fingers crossed, from Lisa Snyder. So she's our accessibility testing specialist, and I wanted to give her the opportunity to say things in her own words.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Snyder. I was brought in to do a manual audit along with my auditors with disabilities. Some of them use different technologies. Some of my auditors are blind, have low vision, are deafblind, and some have cognitive disabilities as well. And I have multiple disabilities. So in my work, I feel that real world accessibility is more than just a web content accessibility guidelines checklist. It's human. This really fits with the concept of nothing about us without us. We're the experts, we're first voice. If you can bring auditors with different disabilities into any of your projects, it brings so much more than just a web content accessibility guidelines checklist. It brings real accessibility. Barriers you find in your audits can be more than just an inconvenience. So barriers can cut deep. The barriers cause a feeling of lack of inclusion and value as a human being. I often have to degrade my independence by asking someone to assist me. However, if you can bring in auditors with disabilities who may use different technologies, letting us tell our experiences and autobiographic stories, I'm telling you right now, you will learn more about disability and accessibility from one auditor than you would from any checking tool, any reading you do, any research. It's that powerful. So auditing by people with different disabilities will help you find out how accessible your website really is for humans. Thank you so much.
All right. Now I'd like to go through our universal design process for adopting Mirador. Skip that one. The first step in our adoption of Mirador was to assess its current accessibility level. To get a correct judgment of what work needed to be done to Mirador base code for improving accessibility, we set up an instance that was as close as possible to the Mirador 3 default settings for a single window view. On this version, we had Lisa from ACE run her study with her diverse group of test users. Settings changes that we could make on our side to enhance accessibility, as well as refactoring that would have to be done to the Mirador base code. We created issues in our own GitHub repo for the setting changes that we could make ourselves. These changes mostly involve lowering the numbers of menus and toggles that users had access to, and ensuring that there were no long lists of thumbnails or image labels displayed by default, making it easier to navigate via keyboard tapping. The end result of this work was the image that's being shown on the slide right now, a more accessible version of Mirador via various configuration options. So there was no change to the base code in this version. Next, we spoke to the Mirador community on the Mirador Slack channel about the other pain points. And after speaking with them, we opened issues in their actual GitHub repo. These issues mostly centered around the screen reader navigation experience. Another important finding that I wanted to stress from this study was the need for CRKN to make text-based representations of our content easier to access in general. Luckily, the digital library team at the Bavarian State Library has developed a plugin for Mirador, which overlays data from OCR files, in our case, it's Alto XML files, on top of their corresponding images. The plugin is called Mirador Text Overlay. By enabling this plugin and ensuring it works well with screen readers, we'll be able to provide users who use these assistive technologies with a similar experience to our sighted users. And that's something that we can't do right now. So I'm really excited about that. Not all of our items have OCR available, though, unfortunately, due to the need for AI to transcribe handwriting and limited availability of our OCR ingest pipeline and other factors. CRKN is working hard to prioritize projects to increase the availability of textual representations of our images, focusing on underrepresented groups first. After learning about the accessibility needs of users and organizing the accessibility related issues in GitHub, we wanted to ensure that introducing this new viewer would be seen as a positive change by our existing users too. To do so, we decided to run a UX study with a small group of our current users as participants. With this goal in mind, we implemented a short pop-up survey. After collecting our test users, we shared a website with a more accessible version of Mirador shown in the last slide. By analyzing the screen recordings, audio, and heat maps collected by our user testing software, we found 9 usability improvements that we can make. And when designing these improvements, we ensured that all the lessons learned from the accessibility testing that we had just done were respected. So this is what we ended up with. And if you are familiar with Canadiana.ca, you'll notice it's quite similar, though more advanced, to our current viewer. Good UX is simple, clear, consistent, and accessible. By running the UX test, we were able to spot areas of the UI that were complex, such as the gallery and page view toggles being hidden under a menu, areas that were unclear. Most of the icons needed some form of helper text for our demographic to understand. Features that we could drop to reduce complexity, like the thumbnail list panel, we don't technically need it, and we just need the gallery, and opportunities to ensure that this design remained consistent with our current design. With the reintroduction of the page dropdown and the first and last buttons. Because Mirador is a React project, it was extremely easy to add and develop plugins to change parts of the UI. I was really happy about that. And continuous user testing is iterative, which means that there's always room for improvement. CRKN is moving towards adopting an open source analytics tool called Matimo, which will help us better understand our demographics and their preferred browsers and devices. By integrating this new data into our design and testing process, we can further broaden our testing scope. leading to even more universal designs. By using universal design principles during our adoption of Mirador, CRCan will be better able to support the needs of all of our users within the Contentdm platform. GLAMs are known for their digital innovation, yet many, especially smaller institutions, face challenges in making their online services user-friendly and accessible because of limited budgets, resources, and in-house expertise. Collaboration and knowledge sharing within the IIIF community can offer a solution. By pooling our resources and expertise to enhance the accessibility and UX of IIIF software, we can make it easier for all users to explore our digital collections. Advocacy for accessibility and UX within the community is another important aspect that will lead to the prioritization of this much needed enhancement. Here's an example of where where IIIF supports this collaboration across GLAMs. Through the Mirador community calls, CRCan presented the findings of our accessibility and usability test to the Mirador group. This group included people from Harvard, Stanford, NYU, Universität Leipzig, and more. Since CRCan tested using Mirador version 3, there was some discussion about how to confirm that these issues would still be relevant in Mirador version 4. Laura Hens, somewhere in this room, the senior UX designer at NYU Libraries, mentioned that she could work with her fabulous in-house UX team to test the issues that CRCan created against Mirador version 4. In the same vein, we received access to contribute to the Mirador base code on GitHub. Sorry. Together, we also created a plan for prioritizing all of the UX and accessibility issues in the Mirador repo. Now developers in the community are processing tickets and assigning themselves to them. This shows that the community calls are leading to multiple institutions collaborating on the continued development of Mirador, which will be a big benefit to GLAM organizations across the globe. We saw Mirador being used in lots of presentations today, for example, and it'll pave the way to equal access for a diverse number of patrons. As multiple member institutions of CRCan also take advantage of Mirador and a variety of software, this work will have an even broader effect on the equalization of access to GLAM materials in Canada. We continue to be grateful to be able to work with the IIIF community on improving Mirador to the benefit of everybody. Speaking of community, I'd like you to join me for dinner tomorrow to talk about what the IIIF community can do to broadly support improved accessibility and UX across the board. I'll post a link to a sign-up form in the conference channel on Slack. Wrong slide, sorry guys. So that's the meetup one, and here's the Mirador plugin one. The Mirador contributors are looking for community input for the prioritization of plugin upgrades to Mirador version 4 to ensure compatibility. If you or your institution you work for uses Mirador, please take a moment to fill out the short survey. It's really short. I'll also post a link to this survey in the Slack channel for the conference. And I'd like to close with a story. Last year, I attended the Access conference, where a major topic of discussion was accessibility. And I'd like to tell you a key message that I heard. I heard how a researcher's vision loss meant that she was not able to access important documents and books that she needed due to poor digitized accessibility. Imagine what it would be like for you in your research or other work tasks if you weren't able to access an important resource that you've taken advantage of in your career. How would that have changed the course that your life took? Thanks.
Today, my name is Sylvian Warner from Cornell University, and our first speakers are Anastasia Pineschi and Peter Pavement, talking about scrolling along the Eastern Silk Roads. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sia Pineschi, and I am the International Tunhong Program Projects Manager.
And I'm Peter Pavement, CEO of Surface Impression.
So today we're going to be speaking with you guys a little bit about a project that we've just completed as of February, which was to redevelop our International Tunhong Program website. And along with this project, we developed a lot of customization that allowed us to better support and display collection items that we host in our database as the IDP. So a little bit of background for the IDP. The program itself was founded in 1994, so we're now in our 30th year. And it brings together items from the Eastern Silk Roads with the intention of creating an online database for these materials to unite them digitally so people can access them from around the world. So we preserve, document, and digitize these materials. And in addition to that, we also create learning resources for people of academic backgrounds of all types to really help their springboard into the collection to really understand what was so significant about these items. So this is an international partnership. At the top, we have our founding partners. There are 7 of them. But we also have a range of contributing institutions or collaborating institutions who provide images and metadata for this database to make it a unique catalog that truly spans the entire world. So a bit of background on the items themselves. The core of the collection comes from Dunhuang, which is a stop along the Eastern Silk Roads, which was an important trading network in the ancient world. Next to the city of Dunhuang are the Mogao Grottos, where in the year 1900, the monk Wang Yuanlu discovered a small alcove that was packed with manuscripts, artifacts, and paintings. And in uncovering this cave, which is now named the Library Cave, he kind of unlocked this little time capsule of what life was like in the ancient times around this area. The materials themselves have been revealed to be essential sources for learning about the Silk Roads. They date from around 100 BCE to about 1200 CE. And in addition to a wealth of paintings and murals and artifacts and coins, one of the primary draws of this collection were the manuscripts, which now showcase over 20 different languages and scripts. So the subjects kind of range from a variety of secular and religious topics. So we truly have an enormous range of material to cater for in this database. So although many of the materials are from the Library Cave, the scope of IDP has now expanded to include other sites along the Silk Roads from around the same time period. And once news of these artifacts spread after the cave was opened, explorers, sinologists, archaeologists from around the world began to travel to this area to acquire materials for their institutions' collections. And this resulted in the rapid dispersal of these materials, which made subsequent research and access extremely difficult. So recognizing that this was a limitation, my program was started in 1994, and in 1998, we released our first website, which allowed researchers to access materials online via the brand new internet. So you can see on the first image here, a beautiful HTML website from when it first launched in 1998, and then only 4 years later, the redevelopment of it to look like this. Which leaves us with the redevelopment in 2005, which was, until earlier this year, what we were dealing with. So this had some pretty significant limitations in terms of search and in terms of just access and trying to figure out how to get to the items that you were trying to get to. And so we identified a list of priorities that allowed us to truly bring together the kind of redevelopment work that we wanted to achieve for this. So in addition to, as a baseline, a new updated visual identity, we also really wanted to focus in on enhancing search and navigation, but also, and quite relevantly for this conference, instituting modern, highly performant image viewers, which would allow for better collection accessibility. So we'll be getting into this a little bit now, but yes, I will pass it to Peter.
Great, thank you. So this is where we came in after a competitive tender. Came in with, as a partnership with knowledge integration. So Surface Impression is a digital agency. We specialize in work with the cultural sector. And knowledge integration is another specialist who creates middleware that puts together cultural heritage collections and the web in kind of short As a pair of organisations, we've worked independently with the kind of different clients that you see at the bottom there, and in the middle section, some of the joint projects that we've undertaken. So the challenges that we face with this were, as you just heard, that the collection is dispersed around the world, so there's no one place to kind of go and deal with it. And the format is a big question. And that's actually what the main part of our discussion today is about. So the Eastern and Central Asian formats have a lot of long scrolls in it, so we're going to explore that. There was also old and idiosyncratic infrastructure, as we described it. Idiosyncratic is a great word. And there are a multitude of objects that weren't served well by typical presentation modes that you find on the web. So everyone wants to take a bit, so here's take a bit. So the pipeline for delivering this starts with what's inside the British Library and the partners. And the database that drives all of this is called 4D, that's the system that's used. And there are also immediate assets associated with that. And then knowledge integrations, SIM products, so which stands for collections, information integration middleware. So SIM starts with a kind of private cloud server where there's a server that's pulling all of this material from these kind of various different sources and getting that over to their storage and involving that in the UI there. And then that delivers that onto the web and then onto the front end for the site. So this problem of format. So the bound book is something that we're used to. It's basically a useful format for mass production of books. And that's been the case, especially in the kind of European tradition, from Gutenberg to the airport shop for right now. And so the design challenge with a book of that nature is to represent the multitude of pages rather than the individual page. A kind of flat page is kind of easy. But really, like if we look at universal view here, a lot is done. Oh, sorry, this is Mirador. My mistake. We look at Mirador here, you can see on the right-hand side, there's a lot of stuff that's around navigating the book. And that's actually one of the hardest bits to get across in kind of web format. And books tend to be, the kind of page tends to go roughly around a 3 to 4 ratio. But what we were dealing with is the scroll. And so when you read a scroll, it's like this. It's kind of, you have a segment and you kind of curl up each end. And so the reader kind of controls which bits they look at rather than the printing. But if you unfurl a scroll, then you know it's really long, and some of these are really, really long. So 10 meters or 30 feet long, and so that's basically a 30 to 1 ratio. So we've got a little recording here of the expression we created. So much of it is around navigating the scroll. So we're using a canvas, and we're allowing people to kind of move along this in a way that you would expect. But at the base of the page, you'll see that there is something that's showing you where you are and gives you quick ways to kind of move from place to place. We also pick up metadata from the collection that tells us what the reading direction is. So you might have noticed we started on the right-hand side and we've been kind of heading left. And these items are organized into segments. So you can see as we kind of move through that those segments can be navigated, and we have all the deep zoom functionality that we'd expect from IIIF. And we can also include other supporting kind of items on the page as well. So as we kind of scroll along here, move on the panel, you can see we're moving from section to section across the canvas, and the navigator at the bottom is helping us understand what's happening. So we're getting to kind of things like backlit photography through the scrolls itself, and also high resolution microscopic photography for the materiality of it. So I'm going to move on from this. Is this? Okay. Next slide. And the other thing is we have to support multiple formats, including scrolls going vertically and objects and other artifacts. So back to you then.
Yeah, so the identification also, the vertical scroll, so we don't have a video of that on this presentation, but based on the metadata, it would position the viewer itself at the top of the scroll and tell you the reading position is to go down or to go up. So it's hoping to be a very modular way of people accessing these materials and really understanding kind of the correct, or one of the, an easier way to be able to interact with them. So I'll also take you a teeny bit through some of the other features we now have on the website. A lot of these we are looking to develop a little bit further, especially by incorporating IIIF things such as like Exhibit.io to really make the educational aspects quite a little bit more built out, but obviously we launched in February, so please be patient with us. But yes, so we have, this is just the general homepage, but in addition to that, we've improved the search through an Elasticsearch instance that also encapsulates some curatorial comparative searches. So we work with curators in the collections or who have areas of focus in these collections to kind of create an equivalencies list that we hope will allow people to more easily kind of put in their own search terms of like a sutra name in one language and pull up sutra names that have been cataloged in multiple languages, kind of that type of equivalency there. We can now filter, which is something we didn't have before, but it's very exciting to us. And have also instituted an advanced search. So we also have these new collection categories, which allow people to springboard into the collection from different types of metadata, such as browsing by archaeological site, or by material, or by collection, or by institutions. So there's really a whole multitude of ways that people can now access these items and get a little bit of background information. And we have behind the scenes materials, such as the incorporation of our blog, which gives a little bit more information about the program itself and new developments that we've done. So we do have a blog on there about our development if you guys are interested in onward research. But also has, articles on conservation and digitization. And a little bit more about the different projects of the program. So we have a digitization project that's ongoing now at the National Library of China to digitize a whole section of scrolls. But you can learn a little bit more about kind of the activities that we do as an organization. And these learning resources, which I mentioned, we would really like to incorporate more IIIF into, but that's obviously being developed currently. So obviously, just the beginning, we really want to improve the viewer, improve metadata, and incorporate annotations onto these scrolls because we have a lot of translations and transliterations that we think could be really significantly served by annotations. And now aligning new opportunities within the sector, such as identifying technologies, which has been really useful to listen to all of you guys here today and in the ends today as well. And yes, outreaching to different communities who might feel like they could be served by some of the work that we're doing. So thank you very much. And please feel free to come up to us and ask us questions if you guys want more information.
Our next presenter is Alison Cherry. Again. Interim since the morning.
Yeah.
Creating a better balance, respectful reuse, and machine learning AI tags in IIIF Manifests.
Hello again, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. Again, just noting that this presentation was co-authored with my colleague Diego Pino-Navarro, who is not here. Okay. Here we are again, and I also wanted to note that for this presentation, I'm also going to be sharing some anecdotes and references related to the wider Metropolitan New York Library Council member community. We have over 200 member institutions in the New York City area, libraries, archives, museums, and also some anecdotes from our sister library councils in New York State. So this presentation is about proposing the implementation of certain standardized no AI or regulated AI tags within IIIF Manifests. Going to go in more into reasoning and some of our thoughts about this, but we really wanted to bring this up as a topic of conversation as a starting point for consideration in the wider community. This is a big topic. We don't think that this is something that everyone's going to invent and start implementing. It's more just to get the discussion rolling and to bring this up at this conference.
Okay, so our organization, we're fortunate to work with a variety of partners, managing digital collections of all sizes with all kinds of materials. Historical materials that have been digitized and presented online for IIIF specifications, but also more digital materials for more recently created content for students and researchers, similar to all of you. And what we are seeing ourselves as managers of repositories and of hosting institution and services that we provide, we're seeing that there's in the past year and a half, 2 years, a huge transformative era of changing how the internet is working, related to the usage of machine learning and AI. And how it was originally created by scraping content off of the internet, which definitely impacted the repository community, digital collections communities. And we're seeing this kind of unregulated consumption of data and resources more and more by machine-powered bots and harvesters, and how this is kind of challenging our well-established ideas of what openness means. I'm just gonna start off right off the bat. I love sharing. If anybody knows me, I will share a French fry with everyone in this room and not think twice about it. I'm neither myself or my colleagues are advocating that we should stop sharing or in any way close off our information, our wonderful collections for sharing. I'm gonna start with a little bit of a parable. Okay. So imagine a dear friend brings you a beautiful flower that they grew with great care. They're super proud of it. And they ask you, hey, can you share this with your community? Your house faces a public square. Maybe you can put that in your window. And you're like, awesome, I will totally do that. So you put it in a vase and you put a little sign in front that says, beautiful flower grown by my dear friend. And then immediately after you place that flower out there, a man with a big clunky machine comes up, takes the flower, stuffs it into the machine's gaping mouth, and says, hold on a second. And then you start to see the machine, or the flower, move through the machine. First you see it diced up into bits, and then scaled down at a smaller size. The original flower stays intact, kind of in this weird machine. You're like, what's going on here? You ask the man, he's like, don't worry about it, it's fine. And then at some point in the machine, you notice that there's a group of people who come off to the side. You didn't really notice them before. And you're like, what are they doing? And you see that whenever a flower, the flower appears in the screen, and then there's a word underneath that says flower, they move the switch up. And you're like, oh, that's kind of different. So this process continues on, and eventually you see your friend's flower fall out the back of the machine. And then a new version of this flower, kind of very similar to what your friend had originally shared, come out the other side. And then the man carries on, he moves along with his machine, he starts grabbing other flowers, bugs, all sorts of things. It's crazy. Your friend picks up their flower, and they look at you, and you're like, what do you do next? And that's kind of where it feels like we're at, to be perfectly honest. There's a lot of people who shared amazing things with us. Both individuals that we work with on a day-to-day basis, people in our field who curated beautiful collections, they describe them, we've shared them, it's wonderful. But now we're in this new era where there's things like this happening, and there's machines everywhere, and we're all kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do. Next up, so again, getting back to some positive things, there are absolutely good use cases and very helpful outcomes for some machine learning and mediated tools and applications, but there are some significant real world costs and that we'd like to consider and like call attention to. I don't have time to go through all of the different information shared on these slides, but please note that there are references related to all these topics and on the deeper slides following. That go into these in detail. So please check out those references if you're interested in taking a deep dive. One thing that I will note on this particular slide is that in the center, that is the Dadaab refugee complex in Kenya, and that is a huge source of micro work for Amazon, Mechanical Turk, and other micro work and ghost work contractors. This next slide shows a multitude of different quotes and also diagrams pulled from studies related to the energy usage that goes on with training AI models and also electricity and carbon and water usage. So a couple things to call attention to. This diagram here on the left, that's originally from a study out of the University of Massachusetts in 2019. The particular models that they referenced at the time were some of the four of the largest models. Two of them that come to mind are how the carbon usage they estimated to train BERT and Chat GPT or GPT-2, I believe, at the time. So there was all sorts of press for this study after it came out, and there was all sorts of like, oh, we can make things more efficient and things will get better and the chips will become more efficient, the algorithms will become more efficient, it's gonna get better and better. A more recent study from 2023 showed that between 2017 and 2021, so after following a little bit on this, the electricity used by Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, the main providers of a lot of commercially available cloud computing, principally geared toward that kind of machine learning and AI, it more than doubled. So what you're seeing in more recent studies is that actually, even when things become more efficient, the companies are like, awesome, we'll just do it more times then, that's great. Another thing that I wanted to highlight that's not often talked about is the water usage for training machine learning and AI in big tech companies. We're talking large scale. There's a study came out in 2023 also, and generally speaking, the machine learning and AI sectors of big tech companies are using about the same amount of water annually as 4 to 6 small African or European countries. So that's about 20 million people, give or take, that are having water, or if you think of it in that way, we're using the same water resources that would be used for about 20 million people a year. Kind of crazy. So these are, again, just like some deeper dives into those different topics for your later reference. So back to our parable in our community and what we think we should do. We think that many of our institutions where we have all these individuals that we are representing, that we are stewarding collections for, and they're looking to us, and we have an opportunity to do things a little bit differently. One of the things that we could potentially do is consider implementing NOAA or regulated AI tags within IIIF Manifests that can be applied in repository environments across the globe. We think this could be done similarly to initiatives crafted by other communities that are already using meta HTML tags, which we're also beginning to implement in our own archipelago repository. We have some proposal for how this might look. And potential tags that you might want to have. And we're not saying this should be applied to all content, but just content that we have that maybe isn't suitable for machine learning or training. I'm going to give you examples in a minute. So just really quickly, you know, this, and we will do the screenshot. There you go. That's what it could potentially look like. Here are a few example tags that we just kind of mocked up that for consideration. We base this on rightstatement.org. And part of the reason that we don't think we can use existing languages or right statements or Creative Commons statements is because they're not necessarily very enforceable and they don't really apply in particular kind of situations that we're talking about. So some key takeaways. So IIIF is an API-based framework geared towards machine-mediated interactions, but IIIF resources are for humans. And I think it's important that we all keep that central to our thinking as we continue to build out our collections and share them. Usage of these standardized tags would always need to be paired with your existing sophisticated, up-to-date DevOps and data security practices. That's not the focus of this presentation, but of course, I think show of hands, how many people here are doing things actively, technically to combat bot scraping or harvesting? How many institutions here have had their websites or maybe even repository sites go offline for a brief period of time at least because of massive flooding of resources? Yeah, it's wild out there sometimes. One time I was on vacation, I didn't tell people this, so I turned off the notifications for that the uptime alerts because I knew it wasn't our responsibility at the time. But I still got that on. Okay, so as we decide to use and integrate these tools in our repository, machine learning and AI tools again, which have wonderful promising use cases and will definitely enable us to do very cool things with our collections that we can't do right now. We need to keep in mind our own curatorial legacies that are going to surface as more and more of these tools are being used with our legacy collection materials, and we also have to think about the complex nature of our own collections. One example that comes to mind right now is that we have been testing out using semantic search using image similarity, and we've already noticed that even using photographs of ourselves, our own faces, so myself and Diego, we've noticed that it doesn't know that some of the image similarity algorithms don't recognize my face at different ages because I'm a woman, and there's a lot of variation in facial recognition software of how well it handles aging in particular, especially for women, especially for women of color, especially for anyone who has indigenous backgrounds. And then Diego has indigenous background, and it does not recognize photos of him or some of his family members. It doesn't tag faces as faces. That's crazy. So if we're implementing tools like that in repositories, what does that say to an end user? What do you do when somebody tries to do a semantic search and they can't find people that look like them? So anyways, that's it. We just think we all need to keep a watchful eye on these new and evolving AI lawsuits and government regulations that come up. One last thing I wanted to note is that a lot of repositories share oral history interviews, and it remains to be seen if audio recordings of individuals is going to be considered biometric data that we're going to have to be responsible for securing and maintaining and preventing from being harvested and used in these tools or in data sets. And then last thing, of course, you all know this, we think that this tech is going to continue to shift over time, and it's going to require our diligent application and monitoring for the rest of our professional lives. And I'm not going to stop talking now, but I just want to leave this up. These are some quotes from a wonderful book by Dr. Joy Bolomini from MIT, a computer scientist, and she's also the founder of the Algorithm Justice League, which is really hard to read in that font color. But I just wanted to end on these great quotes. So thanks for your time today, everybody.
Okay, last but certainly not least, Ian Spangler, Possibilities and Anxieties in IIIF-powered georeference.
Hello, folks. It's great to be here today. I am excited to wrap up these 2 wonderful days of sessions at IIIF. I'm here to talk to you about georeferencing. You've heard a little bit so far this conference about all maps and some of the tools that I'll be discussing. I'm excited to close the show with it. I want to do a couple of quick shout outs. Again, my name is Ian. I'm here from the Leventhal Map and Education Center in the Boston Public Library. I want to give a quick thank you to the Digital Preservation Outreach and Education Network, who provided some support for me to be here today. So I won't spend too much time giving you an overview of what AllMaps is. It's a tool for creating spatial data that will transform georeference maps in a web browser. Yeah, we've seen AllMaps in action earlier today. I don't really want to dig deeply into the technical stack around AllMaps. I'm not going to be talking about how it functions under the hood. What I really want to give you a glimpse into is the perspective of how a map holding institution with IIIF compliant maps, like the Leventhal Center, has been using AllMaps in an applied context, and talk a little bit about what kinds of possibilities exist for building on that work, as well as the kinds of questions and maybe even anxieties that I've encountered talking to other map holding institutions about using AllMaps with their collections. So some context for this, the Leventhal Map and Education Center, alongside the American Geographical Society Library at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I think we have the record for the 2 longest institutional names on a grant. So it's always fun to say that out loud. We got an NEH grant in September of last year to support future development of all maps, as well as the long-term sustainability of the software ecosystem. There are three big goals with this project. First, to build a tool called All Maps Curator. Second, to enrich current, existing, and future digital humanities work. And third, to make all maps sustainable in the long term. And I'll explain what all of these mean in more detail over the course of this. So as a IIIF map building institution, what can you do with all maps? That's one question we're going to dig into. The second thing is, what are the common questions and anxieties that institutions with IIIF maps share when it comes to all maps? Right? And here are possibilities and anxieties. So I'll go through each one of these in turn. First, the first possibility is quite simple. This is sort of at the core of all maps. It's to easily georeference any IIIF compliant cartographic object in a web browser. We just put up some amazing new updates to the All Maps homepage. To get started, you simply find a map, identify its IIIF Manifests. Here's a map from our collections, the Leventhal Center. You can just copy that link right there on the object page. You can paste it into this little search bar on the All Maps homepage, and then get started with georeferencing. Here's my obligatory JSON for the day. The process is quite simple. You create a mask, right? This is the All Maps editor interface. This is the mask. Excludes all non-cartographic information that you don't want in your map. You create some control points which correlate the geographic space of the world with the pixel space of the resource. And voila, we have a map that I am just toggling on and off here for us to enjoy of Los Angeles. And so that's all well and good, right? But there are lingering questions here, like what happens to the geotip, right? What can you do this with multiple projections? Can you get something like a root mean square error or other kinds of distortion calculations? Can all maps do things that a traditional georeferencer can? The short answer is yes, it can. So let me show you a couple of these things. First, all maps is really all about the data, the georeference annotation, which is a specification that the IIIF Maps group published and pushed through over the last few years. The georeference annotation that we're looking at right here contains a unique ID identifying each all maps georeference annotation. We've got metadata about when it was created, and we've got a permalink to the original resource here. This is the really fun stuff, I think. We've got a record for the kind of transformation type, the pixel coordinates from the image, and then the geographic coordinates in the real world. These are both directly from that map of LA that I showed a second ago. Let me move this guy just so we can see. All right. So All Maps supports a few different kinds of transformation types. Right? By default, you can transform using a basic polynomial transformation. This is the kind of algorithm that's turning the round, distorted world into a flat object. So this is the default, but All Maps also supports thin plate spline. I'll just do a little toggle here so you can see. It supports the Helmer projection or transformation type, as well as straight, which is if you're using things like those topo series maps that they talked about yesterday. We've also got some really exciting new features for measuring distortion. Right, you can see some slight green here on this georeference atlas of Medford, I think, in Massachusetts. I think that's what this is. And here it is for thin plate spline. So we're actually looking at the amount of stretching or shrinking that's occurring when you transform this map here. And this is really important for people who are doing, who might be doing more heavy lifting work with geospatial analysis of historic maps. At the Leventhal Center, we have a script that transforms these maps into geotips, taking in our GCPs or ground control points, the All Maps map ID, and then the source image, right? That's just what these variables mean. This is all Python. And as long as you have the spatial data from All Maps, you can do this on your own to produce a geotip. And that'll be made even easier with updates from the All Maps command line interface. Right? So this is an open issue that folks in the development team are working on to project this. Right? So what's the second possibility? For me, I think I'm really excited about large-scale georeferencing and digital humanities projects with All Maps. I'll skip through most of this because Jules has already given us a great overview of some of his work with the City Atlas, as well as automated georeference that you can do with All Maps. I worked with a few students at Brandeis University and just outside of Boston. to do sort of historical interpretation, combining georeference maps and all maps with other historical materials like photographs. Right? These are pretty simple projects, but they allow students to engage with these historical maps in a way that requires very little effort in terms of learning GIS, right? They don't have to download software, they don't need to understand coordinate systems and projection. You can really just get started with something as simple as a link. And we have a tool called AtlasScope that we use all maps exclusively for producing layers. So this just allows you to explore old maps of Boston. To do that, I have a guide that walks my interns through, here's what all maps is, here's how you make the spatial data. We manage all our maps, all our atlases here, and this is what one of the fully georeferenced maps of Lynn, Massachusetts looks like in all maps. And then an AtlasScope. So is there a way to administer these projects? The answer to this is soon with something called All Maps Curator. So we'll be working over the next couple of years as part of this grant to produce a tool called All Maps Curator. I'm going to go through each of these a little more slowly. I sort of see All Maps Curator as having 3 C's: curation, collection, and crowdsourcing. The curation element would allow users to identify certain characteristics about the state of the map, right? Maybe it's transparency, maybe it's background removal, what version, right? It's been georeferenced with, since you can, we have a long list of all of the versions of a georeferenced map. Users should be able to identify those versions and then share stable links. So that's the curatorial element. The collection is just taking those georeference annotations, those curated annotations, and combining them into groups. You should be able to make your own collections and share them. And the last part, crowdsourcing, really extends from that, right? Taking collections of maps and allowing users to assign and review the georeferencing process. These are the kind of key features, the core features of Curator. I'm going to skip over this stuff, I think, because I want to make sure that I have enough time to talk about this, which is the most exciting thing to me, integrating it directly into your digital collections portal. We've done this at the Leventhal Center, thanks to Evan English, our amazing IT manager over at the BPL. You can go straight out to All Maps from our digital collections portal using the All Maps API. It's all based on just URL parameters. So it's very, very easy to set this up conceptually. Maybe even more exciting, we recently finished a contract with Eric Larson, who built a gorgeous blacklight plugin, a geo blacklight plugin, for directly wrapping all maps into any application that manages digital resources using geo blacklight. It's on our BPL Maps GitHub repository. We are thinking about moving it into the geo blacklight community soon repository. Here's what it looks like. It's live in the Big Ten Academic Alliance portal. So you can jump on that geo portal and start to take a look at some of these maps and georeference them if you want. You can jump straight out to georeference an item. Here is the second feature. It shows a map overlay of something that's already been georeferenced. You can toggle transparency, pan and zoom. This is making use of All Maps' leaflet button. So there are functionalities here that make this data, the spatial data, interoperable with lots of other common web mapping libraries. Yes. And a question that we get all the time is, well, how can I say I want this map to be shown when someone clicks on it from my collection? This is something that All Maps Curator will let you do, right? To assign canonical maps that say this is the Leventhal Center's like official stamped version of All Maps of a map georeferenced in All Maps. So this is maybe the big one, right? What happens if All Maps just disappears? We ask this question a lot when we try to talk to folks about why you should include this in your digital repository. And that is a really valid question, right? But it's something that comes up with any digital tool that we rely on. And so for me, I think that with All Maps, because it's all about the data, and because All Maps makes all of its data open, there are lots of ways to hedge against uncertain futures, right? Bearing in mind that this application and these set of tools have a really rich community behind them, continuing to develop and maintain them. So you can download all the data from All Maps right here. It's completely open. And I would invite anyone to grab it and play around with it. There's lots of really exciting stuff in here. At the Map Center, we have written a very quick little script that just cron job grabs all of the annotations associated with our collections nightly. So we have a backup every day that's fresh and new of all our georeference annotations. Eric's Blacklight plugin harvests all of this data every time a change is made, and then it updates and refreshes what's happening, the way that the data is managed on the back end of the Geo Blacklight application. So if you build this into your repository, the plugin will sort of do that data inventory for you. And it also has this excellent georeference facet, so you can sort of filter by maps that are or are not georeferenced. All Maps is a big group of committers, maintainers, and other supporters, right? So it's not just one person putting this together. I'll end on this. There are lots of ways to get involved. Maybe you want to contribute to the ecosystem, the code base. Please talk to any of the folks on the All Maps team today or in the future if you're interested in something like that. Kind of going down from the top, right? You can integrate it into your digital collections portal. There are a few avenues for this. Like I said, Geo Blacklight is supported. You could do it in like vanilla, whatever your collections portal is built in. And we hope to support official plugins for other asset management systems soon. We'd love to hear user feedback from you. All of the All Maps progress project boards are open, so you can go check those out and post questions or issues. The Leventhal Center is supporting projects that use All Maps to do research or creative analysis with small stipends. We'll publish your work, pay you to do it if you're using All Maps. And maybe the easiest thing is just to mention it on your institution's websites. Share All Maps with your students and colleagues. Play All Maps Arcade. I can't emphasize that one enough. So in late fall 2024, I'll leave you with this. The All Maps NEH grant team is going to host a virtual forum for reporting in greater detail about our progress on a lot of different parts of this grant. It's open for another couple of years, so we're going to keep on chipping away at these big questions. So if you want to learn more about All Maps and stay involved with the project, you can fill out this interest form and I will write it to you. Lastly, if you want to play All Maps Arcade, the top 5, I have it on good authority that the top 5 scores, take a screenshot of it. You will be invited to the International All Maps Arcade competition in Delft. More immediately, if you show Bert your high score at the reception, he'll buy you a Cybertruck. Wait, no, he said a beer. He said he'll buy you a beer. Sorry. So I think that's all. Thank you. Sorry, I went a little bit over.